Inside the courthouse right now, we want to send things out to our colleague, Jason Allen. He's also standing by live. Jason, you've been covering this trial not just before it began, really, 7 days ago, but even well before. We are at this point now. We have a guilty verdict for manslaughter and not murder. I'm wondering how much of a surprise, if any, that was for folks who've been following the case, Jason.
You know, when this is something that had been talked about, Ken, ever since that possibility came up during jury selection, when the judge told potential jurors that he might consider manslaughter, that this may be something in between murder and acquittal. And especially here over the last 36 hours, I know there's been a lot of discussion about that this could be something that jurors look to maybe as somewhat of a compromise. I will tell you that in those moments before the verdict was announced, before everybody crowded into that courtroom, and there was a big crowd trying to get into that courtroom, that there were a lot of people outside the courtroom still thinking that, hoping maybe that this would be a murder conviction. There was some spontaneous prayer that was happening outside the courtroom. There was some spontaneous chanting that was happening outside the courtroom. When we got inside, of course, you saw the judge immediately cautioned everybody to have no outbursts or anything like that. But the moment that he read that guilty verdict of manslaughter, immediately there was one woman who got up, rushed out, another one followed her instantly. It was difficult from my perspective to see Aaron Dean's immediate reaction to that. But clearly there were people who were in the courtroom who were not pleased. They were unhappy. And some of the jurors picked up on that as well. We could see that. They could hear some of the noise that was coming from out in the hallway, some of the commotion, and they looked that way, motioned that way. I noticed one of the jurors putting their hand up over their mouth. So that was something that they saw and that they heard. But then, as you heard, as the judge polled each of them individually, they all said, "Yes, Your Honor, this is my verdict." So again, going back to your first question, that thought of what do we think about this? This is something we thought could be a potential for them to fall on over these last 3 weeks. The first time we heard that was a possibility.
Yeah, and you know, obviously we know the outcome now, Jason, but we've been talking to legal experts throughout the process. There have been folks that even thought maybe perhaps a full acquittal was possible. We obviously know that that is not the case here today. But so many options that were really on the table that people were considering, whether the state did in fact prove murder, did they in fact prove manslaughter, or neither of those. But the jury has spoken now, Jason, and they have found him guilty of manslaughter. The punishment phase, that's next, Jason. What do we know about how that might play out, and what kind of punishment is he now facing for manslaughter? Obviously, murder carried with it a life sentence.
Right. So right now in the courtroom, what they're working on here in this little break, and they will reconvene in a few minutes from what we understand, but they're working on trying to figure out scheduling for when they might start that punishment phase. Sometimes in a court, depending on the time of day, you may go into it right away if they're prepared. I'm going to guess that may not happen here. They're probably going to want to get witnesses together, family members, prepare people to talk, because now is the time when you can have, you can introduce more evidence that you couldn't do in that guilt-innocence phase of the trial. As far as punishment, manslaughter carries a possibility of 2 to 20 years in prison. So murder would have been 5 to 99 or possibly life. This is 2 to 20. One of the things the judge explained to potential jurors early in this process was if they come back with a sentence of less than 10 years, there's the possibility of probation for that sentence. If it's more than that, then he would have to serve prison time. So again, this guilt-innocent punishment, this guilt-innocent phase, or I'm sorry, the punishment phase, we'll see if that starts happening today or if it's something they take up tomorrow, but we will see more testimony. We'll see a lot of things that come out in that maybe we did not see in the guilt and innocence part of this trial.
Jason, yesterday when you and I spoke live on the stream, we spoke a little bit about some of the preparations that law enforcement had been taking in anticipation of a possible outcome that could result in perhaps some demonstrations outside that could turn into something like that. Are you getting a sense now that we do have an answer to this verdict as to whether any of those plans might be put in place and as to what could be happening outside those walls?
Yeah, we know they've been put in place. In fact, that was really one of the reasons for a delay between the time we knew that the verdict would come in and it would be announced, and that was to make sure that all of those things that had been planned on really for a year and a half, maybe even longer they've been talking about these preparations, that they can start to put those things into motion. The security presence, the law enforcement presence, it's significant. Even up here on the 7th floor,
Sure.
I can see people at each end of the hallway and watching people very carefully. And we know, we've seen for the past few days, state officers, DPS troopers that have been in the parking lots around the building, different floors. I haven't been outside yet since this came down, so I haven't seen anything that's happening out there, but we know they've been planning that, and I'm sure that they're putting some of those things into place right now just to prepare for clearly some of the frustration that came out of this verdict.
Right, and one more time, Jason, just to get our viewers who are just joining us now caught up, the jury right now has been sort of dismissed temporarily, though, right, so that the judge can talk to lawyers about possible scheduling so that they can move on to the punishment phase. That's what's going on right now, correct?
Exactly. Verdict was read. Each of the jurors was polled individually so that each side could make sure that that was their verdict. The judge told the jury, go back and take a break. We're going to talk about scheduling, how we proceed with the next part of this trial, deciding the punishment. The jury will come back in. The judge will either tell them we're going to get going now or you're done for the day. We'll get started tomorrow. We should see here shortly what the plans are for that part of the trial.
Well, while I still have you, Jason, we're going to cut you loose here in a bit because I know you got work to do, but I thought I saw you in another, in Caroline's live shot in the back. Did you have a chance to speak to any family members on either side? I thought maybe I saw you near Tatiana's family.
We were talking with Lisa Pamplin, an attorney who has been here, and with a lot of the family members every single day. She was actually talking about how she was not happy with the verdict, but I guess pleased that maybe there was a finding of guilty in something. She said a lot of the people who were frustrated, she said, don't understand the process. She's trying to get them to understand that. As far as Tatiana's direct family, her brother and sister, they sat there during the verdict until the jury went out, and then they left very quickly. So no, nobody's really had a chance to speak with them. I think they left to kind of take this all in and then figure out what's next here as this next part of the trial starts.
Sure, and as you mentioned, Jason, the next step here is to move on to the punishment phase, the sentencing phase, and this charge now of manslaughter, as you said, carrying 2 to 20 years. All right, Jason, we'll cut you loose for now. Please, if anything happens, of course, let us know, and we'll chat soon. But we'll chat with you in a bit. Jason Allen live for us inside the courthouse in Fort Worth. Thank you very much.